What happens when the owner of a car wash chain grabs a sponge and works next to employees who have no idea he built the company from scratch? Yale Ellison stared out the window of his office, tapping his pen against the side of his coffee mug. The numbers looked fine on paper. Profits were steady, customer flow was up, but something didn't sit right. Over the last 2 months, he'd been hearing snippets through customer service emails and anonymous employee complaints. Nothing dramatic, just little things. A few reviews mentioned rude staff. A couple of workers had quietly quit without notice. One complaint said, "The place runs like a fast food." 18 locations. Yale had built them over 12 years, starting with a single bay in a dusty corner of Arizona. He'd lived out of his truck the first year, sleeping behind the wash, reinvesting every dollar. Now, the company had grown into a trusted chain spread across the Southwest. But lately, it felt like his name was still on the signs, but his eyes weren't in the buildings. To make matters worse, his district manager, Clay, hadn't been helpful. Every time Yale brought up the complaints, Clay brushed them off. "It's just a vocal few," Clay had said last week. "You can't make everyone happy, numbers don't lie." But Yale knew better. People didn't quit good jobs without reason. And customers didn't take time to write complaints unless something real happened. That's when he made the decision. He was going undercover. He wasn't going to send someone else or set up hidden cameras. He was going to put on a fake name, a worn uniform, and work the line himself. He picked the location with the most mixed reviews, Store 13, located in Mesa, Arizona. It was one of the busiest in the chain. High volume, great location, but oddly inconsistent reviews. Some customers praised the speed. Others said the workers were cold or careless. One review stuck with him. "The guy with dreads was the only one who treated me like a human." Yale had never been to Store 13 in person. He knew the manager, Nolan, only through video calls and quarterly reports. No photos were posted in the offices. With a shaved beard, temporary tattoos, and a pair of old glasses, he looked more like a guy trying to get back on his feet than a man worth millions. Using the alias Rick, he applied through an agency that supplied temp labor. Within 3 days, he was scheduled for a training shift. He pulled into the back lot just after 6:30 in the morning. The sun was barely up, and a line of cars was already snaking around the corner. Inside the employee room, a young woman with a clipboard barely looked up. "A name?" "Rick," he said. She scanned her list. "You're the new temp, first day." He nodded. "Cool, just hang tight, Nolan will be out in a sec." A few minutes later, a tall guy with thinning blonde hair and mirrored sunglasses stepped in. "Yo, Rick, I'm Nolan. You'll be shadowing Chris today. Stay out of the way, move fast, and don't talk to customers unless they talk to you first." "Got it." "Got it," Yale said. "Good, you're on vacuum bay duty. Let's go." The next 8 hours were a blur of water spray, soap foam, and backbreaking work. The team moved fast. Too fast. No one talked much. Most of them looked exhausted. Nolan barked orders from the side, pacing with a coffee in hand but never lifting a finger. "Move it, Chris. That's the 3rd time you missed the rear mats." "Marcus, what are you doing? That's not how you shine tires." Yale noticed Nolan was quick to yell, but never quick to help. Every time a car backed out, Nolan was already lighting up someone else. Around noon, the heat climbed near triple digits. One of the dryers broke down, and the team had to towel dry cars by hand. Nobody complained, but the tension was thick. That's when Yale saw something that made him stop mid-step. A customer had pulled in a woman in her late 40s, driving an older sedan that had clearly seen better days. The front bumper was scratched up, and the AC sounded like it was wheezing. As she stepped out, Nolan walked over. She handed him a voucher. "Hi, I got this as part of the..." "This is expired," Nolan cut in. "What? I just got it 2 weeks ago." Yeah, well, it expired last Friday. Can't take it. The woman's face fell. Please, I drove 20 minutes. I've been saving up. Not my problem. You want the wash, you pay full price. Yale watched from a distance, unsure whether to step in. He was undercover, he had to stay quiet. But before he could decide, someone else moved. A worker with long dreadlocks and a faded name tag that said Jalen stepped forward. Hey, Nalan, Jalen said calmly. What? Nalan snapped. I'll cover the wash, take it out of my next check. Nalan blinked. What? You heard me, she came all the way down here. She's not trying to scam anyone. I got it. Nalan scoffed. It's your money. Jalen turned to the woman. We'll take care of your car, ma'am. Go ahead and have a seat inside. Cold water's free. The woman's eyes filled with tears. Thank you so much. Jalen just nodded and turned back to the car, already pulling out the vacuum from the back seat. Yale stood frozen, heart pounding. This was the exact kind of moment that would never show up in a spreadsheet. No manager report would include this, and that guy Jalen, he didn't even hesitate. After the woman went inside, Yale walked over under the pretense of grabbing a towel. You didn't have to do that, he said. Jalen shrugged. It's not about have to, it's just right. She needed help, we're not robots. Yale nodded slowly, feeling a knot form in his throat. No title, no attention, just kindness. And Nalan had acted like it was nothing. Yale had seen enough for today, but he wasn't done. He was coming back tomorrow. Yale arrived before sunrise the next morning, parking a block away and walking in through the side alley entrance like the rest of the crew. The air was cooler than the day before, but it carried that same dry edge that promised heat by mid-morning. He wore the same uniform shirt from yesterday, already stained and stiff from soap and sweat. No one questioned it. Inside the break room, the lights buzzed overhead. A few workers sat slouched on the benches, sipping from plastic water bottles or scrolling on cracked phones. No one spoke much. The energy was flat resigned, not tired, like people who had trained themselves not to expect better. Jalen was there too, leaning against the vending machine, arms crossed. He nodded at Yale. You made it back, he said. That's rare. Yale gave a small shrug. Didn't run off screaming, figured that makes me qualified. Jalen chuckled, then looked down at the worn floor. Some don't last past lunch, not because they're lazy, just, this place has a way of burning you out fast. Before Yale could reply, Nalan's voice cut in from the hallway. Let's move, people, we're already behind. First cars are lined up. Everyone stood, no pep talk, no greeting, just motion. By the time Yale grabbed his gloves, half the team was already outside. The wash was running at full tilt by 7. Every 5 minutes, another row of cars inched forward, windows half down, drivers distracted by phones or kids in the back seat. The team worked in tight patterns, one on vacuums, one on mats, one on glass, another checking the trunk. The rhythm was efficient, but fragile. One misstep and the whole line slowed down. Mid-morning, a new temp arrived, thin guy, probably in his early 20s, with tattoos up his forearms and a twitchy sort of energy. He introduced himself as Devin. Nalan barely looked at him before assigning him to tire shine. Devin sprayed too much, missed spots, and kept forgetting to step back before the car rolled. Twice, Yale had to yank him back by the sleeve before a bumper clipped his knee. After the second time, Yale pulled him aside behind the vacuum station. You okay? Devin wiped sweat from his forehead with a rag. Yeah, just, haven't done this before, thought it'd be easier. It's not, Yale said plainly, but you're gonna get hurt if you don't slow down. I can't slow down, Devin shot back. He's already barking at me like I'm screwing everything up. Yale glanced toward Nolan, who was pacing with a tablet in hand, watching the line like a hawk. "Look," Yale said, lowering his voice. "Just focus on doing one thing right before moving to the next. Don't worry about him." Devin gave a tight nod, but his hands kept shaking as he turned back to the line. By noon, the heat had settled in like a weight on their backs. The break room's swamp cooler barely made a dent. Lunch was staggered 10 minutes max, and only when cars slowed. Yale grabbed a granola bar from his bag and sat on a milk crate in the back lot. Jalen came out a few minutes later, holding a half-eaten sandwich. "You always eat out here?" Yale asked. "Better than inside," Jalen replied. "Too many people in too small a space." Yale chewed in silence for a moment, then said, "You've been here long." "Almost 3 years," Jalen said without hesitation. "Started part-time, stayed because I needed the hours. Now I'm just here." "You ever think about moving up, supervisor or something?" Jalen shook his head. "They don't promote from floor, they bring in outside leads, guys who have never held a hose." Yale looked at him. "That ever bother you?" Jalen took another bite, chewing slowly. "Only when they act like we're invisible." Before Yale could answer, a loud bang echoed from the wash tunnel. They both stood up fast. Devin was on the ground, one hand gripping his leg, the other bracing against the edge of the drying station. A metal bracket had come loose from a side panel and clipped his shin. Nothing catastrophic, but enough to draw blood. Nolan was already there. "What the hell were you doing?" Devin winced. "It came loose, I didn't touch it." "You must have leaned on it wrong. Those panels don't fall off on their own." Jalen stepped in. "He didn't lean. That bracket's been loose for weeks. I told Manny about it last month." Nolan turned. "And did you log it?" "I told a lead. That's protocol, right?" Nolan's jaw tightened. "We'll handle it later. Devin, go clean up, you're off the line." Devin looked lost. "Do I still get paid?" Nolan didn't answer. Instead, he walked off toward the office, tapping on his tablet. Jalen crouched next to Devin and helped him up slowly. Yale grabbed a rag and wrapped it gently around the cut to stop the bleeding. "Thanks," Devin muttered. After they got him to the break room, Jalen leaned on the counter, arms crossed. "That panel's been shaking for weeks," he said quietly. "Every time I bring something up, it's ignored." Yale nodded. Jalen looked over. "You ever seen a place where nobody listens?" Yale didn't answer right away. He looked at the cracked tiles beneath their feet, then back at Jalen. "Yeah," he said finally. "I've seen worse, but this one's getting close." That afternoon, the pace picked up again. The cars kept coming, the sun kept climbing, and no one mentioned the busted bracket again. Nolan didn't check in. No one from maintenance showed up. The shift just kept pushing forward like nothing had happened. Around 4, a customer pulled in with a black SUV, music thumping from the speakers. The man inside wore aviators and looked impatient before the car even stopped. He stepped out and tossed his keys to Marcus, a tall worker who'd been silent most of the day. "I want the inside spotless," the man said. "Leather seats, console, everything. Last time you missed the cup holders." Marcus nodded without speaking and got to work. As the wash moved forward, Yale noticed Marcus kept glancing over his shoulder. The man stood nearby, arms crossed, watching every move, not just watching, hovering. When Marcus missed a smudge on the rear window, the guy snapped. "Hey, you blind, that's still dirty." Marcus flinched. Jalen, 2 stations down, looked up but didn't move. Yale stepped in. "He's got it." The man turned. "You work here?" "Today I do." "Then make sure he does it right. I pay good money for this." Yale met his eyes. "And he's doing exactly that. You want it redone, we'll do it. But you don't talk to people like that." The man narrowed his eyes but didn't reply. He stepped back to his car. Marcus finished the job in silence. Later, as they closed up, Marcus walked past Yale and said, "Thanks." Yale just nodded. Back in the break room, Nolan gathered the crew for the end-of-day rundown. "We hit target numbers today. Barely, still not good enough. I need tighter times on vacuum and tire shine, too many delays. Tomorrow, we're cutting the overlap window, no more than 3 cars stacking in the dry zone." Someone muttered under their breath, but no one said anything out loud. Nolan looked at Devin, still sitting with his leg iced. "We'll need coverage tomorrow. You think you're good?" Devin didn't answer. Nolan turned to the group. "If not, one of you steps in. I don't care who, just make it happen." He walked out without waiting for replies. Jalen looked at Yale. "You coming back?" Yale nodded. "Yes, one more day." Jalen grinned faintly. "Careful, might start to care." Yale didn't reply, but something had already shifted inside him. He wasn't going to watch this place grind people down one shift at a time. Tomorrow, he'd see what happened when the wrong person got pushed too far. By the third morning, Yale's back hurt. Not just the kind of sore that comes from a long day, this was the kind that settled into your bones and reminded you you weren't 20 anymore. He forced himself out of the rented Toyota, stretched his arms against the roof, and steeled himself for what he knew had to happen today. He'd seen enough. Inside the building, the mood felt heavier than before. Devin hadn't come back. No explanation, no call, just gone. No one seemed surprised. Nolan didn't bring it up during the pre-shift rundown. He simply handed tire shine duties to Marcus without comment and moved on. Jalen caught Yale's eye as they filed out. "Guess he didn't make the cut," he said quietly. Yale nodded. He shouldn't have had to. Jalen didn't respond. He just walked ahead, shoulders squared like someone bracing against a storm that never quite passed. The first hour moved fast. Without Devin, the rotation was tighter. Marcus was already stretched between 2 stations, and Jalen had to double up on interior detailing. Yale took on both vacuum and rear mat duty just to keep things from piling up. Nolan stood near the control box, occasionally barking out time checks like a coach counting down a shot clock. 42 seconds on that sedan, you're slipping. Mid-row trucks backing up traffic, clear it faster. No one answered, they just worked. Around mid-morning, an older man in a mechanic's uniform pulled in with a company van, paint chipped and sagging under its own weight. He didn't say much, just handed over a voucher and went to sit on a bench near the vending machines. His eyes looked tired, not angry, just worn thin. Yale moved to the driver's side and paused. The floor was caked in hardened mud, the seat stained with years of grease and coffee spills. This wasn't going to be a quick pass and go. He looked up, caught Jalen's glance, and gave a small wave. "Gonna need help on this one." Jalen walked over without a word and got to work. For the next 10 minutes, they scrubbed like surgeons, lifting floor mats, scraping grit from the cup holders, brushing out crumbs so old they might have predated smartphones. When they finally rolled the van out, the difference was night and day. The man walked over slowly, looked inside, then stood there without moving. Jalen handed him the keys. "We did what we could, hope it helps." The man blinked at the dashboard, then back at them. "This is the first time this thing smelled like anything but burnt oil. Appreciate it." He didn't smile, just gave a nod and drove off. As the day wore on, the breaks between cars vanished entirely. At one point, Marcus dropped a bottle of spray foam and it rolled under a moving SUV. He hesitated, unsure whether to dive for it. Nolan barked from the side. "Leave it, get the next one." Yale jogged over and nudged the bottle back with his foot, then handed it to Marcus. "You good?" he asked. Marcus nodded, but his eyes didn't meet his. By early afternoon, the sun had turned the asphalt into a skillet. Several of the team had soaked through their shirts. The water cooler in the break room had run dry an hour ago, and no one had replaced the jug. Nolan didn't seem to notice or care. Then came the breaking point. A woman pulled in driving a mid-range crossover, maybe 5 years old, with 2 boys in the back seat. One was crying. The other was kicking the back of the driver's seat. She stepped out and walked up to Nolan, holding out her phone. I prepaid for the full interior detail yesterday. Got the confirmation here. Nolan barely glanced at the screen. This location doesn't accept mobile vouchers. You need it printed. She stared at him, but your site says. We've had issues with fakes. No print, no wash. The younger boy started screaming. The woman looked back at the car, then at Nolan. Please, I have 15 minutes before I have to pick up my daughter. I can't come back. Not my fault, Nolan said. Jalen turned from the next bay over. We've accepted mobile confirmations before. Nolan turned on him. You a manager now? No, Jalen said, but I know what fair looks like. Yale dropped his towel and walked over. She paid, that's all that should matter. And you're a temp, Nolan shot back. So unless you want to be done today, step back. Jalen took a step forward. He's right. Nolan's voice rose. Both of you want to keep pushing this, we'll see how long you last. The woman took a step back, clearly uncomfortable. Her son had quieted, but now looked worried. Yale exhaled slowly, his pulse rising. That's enough. Nolan scoffed and turned his back. You don't call shots here. Yale took a step forward. I do. Nolan turned again, face twisted. What the hell are you talking about? Yale reached into his back pocket and pulled out a folded ID card. He held it up, the company logo and his name clearly visible. Yale Ellison, founder, owner, the reason this place even exists. The silence hit like a dropped wrench on concrete. Jalen blinked. Marcus froze halfway through spraying a window. Even the woman with the boys stood still, unsure what to do next. Nolan's face drained of color. You're joking, he said, voice dry. Yale didn't blink. No, I've been here 3 days, watching, listening, and I'm done letting this place run like a sweatshop. Nolan opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Yale turned to the crew. All of you take 10, get water, sit down. No one moved at first. I'm serious. Jalen was the first to step away, then Marcus, then the rest. They drifted toward the edge of the lot like people waking up from a long sleep. Yale turned back to Nolan. You've been running this store like a stopwatch factory. No regard for safety, no respect for the people doing the actual work. You don't get to yell at them, ignore maintenance issues, and turn paying customers away because it's inconvenient. I was following protocol, Nolan said, but his voice was brittle. No, you were following ego. That stops now. Nolan crossed his arms. What? You're just going to fire me in front of everyone? That depends. On what? On whether you think you've done anything wrong. Nolan hesitated. I've hit every performance target you've set. Not one of those targets included treating people like trash. Nolan didn't answer. Yale looked around at the other workers. This team has been running on fumes. They've been covering for each other, fixing problems you ignored, and stepping up in ways you haven't even noticed. Jalen paid for a customer's wash out of his own pocket, and you shrugged it off. He turned back to Nolan. You can walk away now, or I can walk you out, but either way, you're done here. Nolan stood still for a moment, then threw down his tablet and walked toward the back door. No one said a word as he disappeared. Yale turned to the woman, still standing by her car. I'm sorry for your wait, we'll take care of it, on the house. She gave a slow nod, still processing. As Jalen stepped back toward the vehicle, Yale put a hand on his shoulder. You good to lead this one? Jalen nodded once, then got to work. Yale looked over at Marcus. We'll talk later. I want your take on what's working and what's not. Marcus looked stunned, then gave a small nod. For the first time in 3 days, the car wash didn't feel like a pressure cooker. The hoses still hissed, the dryers still roared, but the energy had shifted. Yale turned back toward the office. He had one more thing to do. The next morning, Yale arrived at store 13 just after 6. This time, he didn't park down the block or slip through the side entrance. He pulled into the manager's spot out front, stepped out in clean jeans and a black polo with the company's logo stitched across the chest. Inside, the crew was already gathering for the day. Some looked surprised to see him. Others just watched, unsure what today would bring. Jalen stood near the door, arms loosely crossed, expression unreadable. Yale walked to the center of the room and paused, letting the silence settle before he spoke. I won't waste your time, he said. You all know who I am now. I spent the last 3 days working next to you, and what I saw was a team carrying weight that never should have been yours. No one interrupted. I saw equipment that should have been replaced weeks ago. I saw decisions made by someone who hadn't earned the right to lead. And I saw all of you showing up, pushing through conditions that would have sent most people walking. Marcus shifted his weight. A few others glanced toward Jalen, who hadn't moved. Yale continued. Nolan is no longer with the company. Effective immediately, Jalen will be stepping in as interim site lead. That's not a favor. It's long overdue. Jalen blinked once, then looked around the room like he wasn't sure he'd heard right. Yale turned to him. You've earned this. You've been holding this team together without a title for far too long. You'll have support, and we'll revisit permanent placement in 30 days. But starting now, you're in charge. Jalen cleared his throat. I didn't ask for that. I know, Yale said. That's why you're right for it. He turned back to the team. We're bringing in a regional maintenance crew this afternoon. Every safety issue gets logged and resolved before the weekend. No exceptions. I'm also sending over 2 floaters from nearby locations to fill the gaps until we can hire properly. That'll give you breathing room. A hand went up in the back terrell, a quiet guy who'd been on vacuum detail most of the week. What about hours? We've been short and people are burning out. Until staffing's back to full, we're adjusting shifts to rotate pressure. That means scheduled cooldowns, not just 10 minutes when the line slows. You'll coordinate that with Jalen. It's not perfect, but it'll keep people upright. Heads nodded, not enthusiastic but accepting. It was something. Starting next week, Yale added, I'll be visiting a different location every month. No notice, no filters. If I ever let things drift this far again, that's on me, but I won't. He stepped back, giving Jalen a small nod. All yours. Jalen looked around, still processing. All right, he said finally. Let's get the floor prepped. Hose check first, then foam nozzles. Marcus, I want you on filter change, start with Bay 2. The team moved, not fast, not with sudden energy, but with purpose, real purpose. For the first time, they had a reason to believe someone was actually listening. Yale stepped outside to make a call. He reached his operations director on the second ring. I need an audit on every site's maintenance logs, he said. Compare it to incident reports. If there's a gap, I want to know why. The director hesitated. That's going to ruffle feathers. Not as much as a lawsuit would have, if Devon's injury had been worse. He hung up and walked the perimeter of the lot. 2 vacuums were still sputtering. One hose had a slow leak near the nozzle. He made mental notes but didn't interrupt the crew. Jalen had it under control. By late morning, the rhythm had changed. It wasn't smoother, yet the bottlenecks still happened, but the tension had eased. People weren't snapping at each other. Jalen moved between stations, checking in, not hovering. When Marcus flagged him about a slow dryer, Jalen didn't nod vaguely or tell him to work around it. He grabbed a ladder and inspected the airflow himself. Around noon, Yale stepped inside the break room to find Marcus sitting in the corner, eating a sandwich in silence. He looked up as Yale entered. "You good?" Yale asked. "Better," Marcus said, still not used to someone actually fixing stuff. Yale sat across from him. "That's going to be the standard, not the exception." Marcus picked at the edge of his bread. "Almost quit last week. Wasn't even going to say anything, just walk." "What stopped you?" He shrugged. "Jalen, he never said it, but he always made it feel like we mattered, even when everything else didn't." Yale nodded. "That's why he's leading now." Marcus looked up. "You ever think about how far this got before you saw it?" "All the time," Yale said, "but I'm trying to make sure I never forget it." After lunch, the maintenance crew arrived. They wore matching gray polos and moved with quiet precision, logging every malfunction and tagging equipment for replacement. Jalen walked with them, taking notes in a small spiral pad. Yale didn't hover. This wasn't his show anymore, not in the daily sense. He spent the afternoon reviewing the site's hiring pipeline, noting how many applicants had been screened out by arbitrary filters, credit checks, resume gaps, missing references. All policies approved years ago. Policies he'd never revisited. He deleted them. Before leaving, he gathered the team once more. "I'll be back in 3 weeks," he said. "Not to check on you to work another shift. Any location you choose, you'll let Jalen know where you want me." Terrell raised an eyebrow. "You're gonna vacuum again?" "If that's what you want," Yale said, "or tire shine or detail, whatever's needed." Jalen stepped forward. "You sure that's not just for show?" "No," Yale said, "but if it keeps me honest, I'm okay with that." People smiled, small, tired smiles, but real. Yale walked to his car as the sun dipped lower. The lot was quieter now, the lines steady but manageable. He paused by the edge of the sidewalk, watching Jalen check a clipboard while talking with Marcus and another crew member. They weren't nodding silently. They were talking, really talking. It wasn't fixed. Not yet. The crew was still understaffed. The heat wasn't going anywhere. Equipment still needed replacing, and trust didn't rebuild overnight. But for the first time, people weren't surviving their shift. They were owning it. Yale opened the car door, sat down slowly, and looked at the worn towel still sitting in the passenger seat from his undercover shift. He left it there. Not as a reminder of how bad things had gotten, but of how much better they had to stay.